If you're like I was about a year ago, you've spent time tweaking your pedal board, changing the different pedals out, making a different order, and maybe you've even got it sounding pretty good, like I did. But something doesn't quite sound right. Let me show you what I mean. Here's how my Telecaster sounds through my pedal board with no buffer. I'm going to play neck, middle, and bridge. So not bad, no pedals are on. This is just straight through my pedal board into my tube amp. Okay, so now I'm going to play through the same guitar into the same amp, but this time I've got a 10-foot guitar cable plugged directly into my tube amp. So here's how that sounds. I'm going to play neck, middle, and bridge position again. So you hear that? It's like everything opened up and has more life. I actually kind of stumbled across this by accident. Ryan and I were working on the Q-Tune pedal, which is that DIY tuner that we've got on the website. And I was playing a lot, testing things out, playing through my pedal board with my guitar. And everything sounded fine. And then one day I plugged my Telecaster straight into my amp and I'm like, whoa, this sounds way brighter. What's going on? And we were doing everything that we could to keep things simple in the Q-Tune circuit. And so that meant no buffer. But when I realized that, and that my pedal board was changing my tone, that changed everything. And from that point on, we started working on the buffer. Let me walk you through a few listening tests. I'm going to keep my pickup on the bridge pickup. I'm going to play the same exact thing. And I'll put on the screen what thing I'm playing through. Make sure you're listening with some good headphones or some speakers so you can really hear the difference. Okay, so with just those samples, what differences did you hear? Leave me a comment with just maybe one word. Brighter, clearer, no difference, didn't like it. Tell me what you thought. Another thing I wanted to show you is just how easy it is to change between buffered bypass and true bypass mode in Q-Tune settings. Once you come into the settings, you can see that true bypass, buffered bypass, and buffered bypass plus monitoring are your options. And when you come into this mode, it unmutes your signal so you can actually hear how it sounds. Right now I'm in buffered bypass mode, so that sounds like this. And I can press and hold, or if I was down there I could actually, tap it with my finger, but I'll play and then at the same time I'll press and hold and it will switch to true bypass mode. And this is going through my pedal board, which isn't big, but you can definitely hear a difference in how it changes the sound. See how a lot of the high end was just dropped right off? So let's go the opposite direction. Well, if that's all that you came for, thanks for hanging out with me. But I'm going to go into the circuit description now if you'd like to take a look under the hood and see how the actual buffer is implemented. Okay, so let's talk through this a little bit of how the buffer is actually working. When you're in true bypass mode, this relay is switched like that. So ignore those ones. And let's see, yeah. So when your signal comes in, it comes over here, goes through that switch, that relay, and comes in through this coupling capacitor. And it's important that a buffer gives the same AC impedance that your guitar amp does. And if you notice, we have these two 2 mega ohm resistors, and in parallel they give an AC impedance of 1 mega ohms, which is exactly what you get when you plug directly into most amplifiers. Okay, so that's important. You want high impedance on the input. And then what happens is your guitar signal comes in through that coupling capacitor into the non-inverting input of the TLO72 op amp. And it's configured in unity gain, which means that it's not increasing the volume of the signal. But what ends up happening is when it goes through these capacitors here on the output, that creates a very low impedance. And so basically what your op amp is doing is changing from a high impedance to a low impedance on the output. But it turns out to be a much stronger signal. Okay, and then of course it comes out and goes to the output jack. So that is the signal flow, and that's kind of some basic things about a buffer and why it's important. Now I'll just point out a couple of other things while we're here. Also in this mode, or when you're in tuning mode, your signal is coming in and it's being passed on. This other half of the TLO72 is also configured in unity gain, but it's going over to this gain section, and we're using an MCP 6002 chip, or it's an op amp, and it's configured to basically with these resistors here, it's set to push that signal into high gain so that by the time it exits both stages, it's actually going out to the ESP32 through the GPIO number 18. The ESP32 is seeing a very clipped signal, almost digital, but that actually helps the zero crossing algorithm detect the pitch much quicker. So that is how that part works. And you saw on the QTune buffer settings page that there's also a buffered bypass, that's hard to say, buffered bypass with monitoring. So what you can do in buffered bypass plus monitoring mode is you can actually unmute the guitar with QTune and still see the QTune is tuning at the same time that you're playing and that you can hear it through your amp. So a lot of people like to use that. I throw it on occasionally just to see as I'm playing I don't have to switch and mute to be able to tune my guitar. So that's just a quick walkthrough of the schematic. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, be sure to ask them in the comments and we'll do our best to answer any questions you might have. Well, now you know what a buffer is and why we put one in QTune. If you're building a QTune or modding it or just curious, I'd love to hear what you think about the QTune, about the buffer. If you're using a different buffer, how do you like them and how are you using it? As always, stay tuned.